Hello. Today we're going to be reading Swish by JD Strunk. As you listen to the story, I'd like for you to think of the characters, the setting, what the problem is, the events of the story, and what the solution for the problem is. It's a 5-finger retell, and it helps to just keep track of important information as you're listening to the story. Jeremy Automatic Astor stood at the free throw line. 2 shots were forthcoming. 2 points would win the game. Even so, it was not the orange lip of the rim that was the focus of his attention, nor was it the 400 chanting fans. Rather, Jeremy was attempting to calculate the odds of a game ending on a technical foul, and then the further odds that the resulting foul shots should determine the outcome of that game, and then the odds that the game in question should determine whether Jeremy's team, the Lincoln High Terrapins, would advance to the state tournament for the first time in the school's history. Whatever the probability, it seemed infinitesimally small, and yet here he was. The nickname was a burden he'd gifted himself. For as long as he could recall, Jeremy had wanted to play varsity basketball. He'd had 2 cousins, twins, who had started for Lincoln High varsity 10 years earlier, and for 3 years Jeremy had stared in slack-jawed awe from the bleachers as they ran out of the locker rooms and into the gymnasiums, high-fiving rows of students before settling into their pregame routine. Jeremy had imagined what it must feel like to hear a chant, hundreds of voices strong, and to know it was all for you. But his cousins had hit 5'11" in 8th grade. Entering his junior year, Jeremy was a mere 5'5". Given his lack of verticality, he knew that any playtime would be dependent on what else he could offer the team. Post positions were out, as was point guard. Terry Skoda had been blessed with the hand-eye coordination that no amount of practice could replicate. But shooting, that held some possibility. Shooting was something he could refine on his own. Moreover, it was something he was already good at. As a 6th grader, he had won an award at the Terrapin Summer League for being the only player to never miss a free throw. Granted, 7 for 7 was not a huge data set, but perfection is perfection. And so it was decided Jeremy would become the best shooting guard in the history of Lincoln High. The summer before his junior year, Jeremy made himself a schedule. The schedule consisted of 7 hours of basketball a day, 3 hours in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, and 2 in the evening. Hour after hour, Jeremy could be seen in his driveway shooting baskets. By midsummer, it had become a good-natured joke amongst his neighbors to link their acts of domesticity to Jeremy's shooting routine. Get out of bed. Jeremy's been shooting for an hour already. Honey, please mow the yard before Jeremy begins his afternoon baskets. If you haven't cleaned your room by the time Jeremy leaves his driveway tonight, we are going to have some real issues, mister. By August, Jeremy could consistently make 95 out of 100 free throws. Neighborhood kids would sometimes come to watch, and a handful even began placing bets on his astounding consistency, at least until their parents found out and put a stop to it. Okay, we're going to pause. Who's the main character of the story? And what is one of the settings? So we're going to pause. We're going to think of that. Who's the main character? And what is one of the settings? We don't fully know what the problem is yet, but we're having enough information so far that we could start to make an educated guess about what the problem could be. At basketball tryouts that fall, Jeremy's shot was unshakable. Anything he threw up seemed destined to drop into the hoop. It was a display of marksmanship unknown in the annals of Lincoln High sportsdom. As consequence, and despite his height disadvantage and lackluster ball handling skills, Jeremy made varsity. Last off the bench, but varsity nonetheless. Jeremy was elated. That elation lasted about a month. Come October, practices consumed Jeremy's life. Every weekday after school for 2 hours, plus another 3 hours on Saturday. But unlike during the summer, where Jeremy had been the sun of his own solar system, at practice, Jeremy was an unnamed asteroid plodding through the Oort cloud. Jeremy was taking Intro to Astrology this term. When combined with his daily dose of schoolwork, it meant that Jeremy's life had no room for frivolity. Over the past year, his stack of books to read for fun had grown from 3 to 12. Moreover, he still hadn't learned a single chord for the guitar his parents had bought him for his 16th birthday last April. And without the guitar, how would he ever win over Lauren, the only girl in high school seemingly unimpressed by his varsity jacket? In truth, Jeremy had barely known Lauren, but she was Blake's friend, and Blake had been Jeremy's best friend since kindergarten, as well as his nemesis. All through childhood, Jeremy had compared his achievements to Blake's. Academically, Jeremy was a solid B student, whereas Blake maintained a 4.0 with distressing ease. Whereas Jeremy's musical tastes leaned toward the mainstream, Blake's were eclectic. Jeremy quoted Friends, Blake quoted Seinfeld. So when Jeremy showed aptitude for basketball in the 5th grade, he savored the moment, recess being the only time in Jeremy's life that Blake sat beneath him in the social hierarchy. Soon thereafter, Blake abandoned basketball altogether, opting instead to read guitar magazines beneath the slide. Sophomore year, Lauren Sanchez had moved to town and instantly bonded with Blake over obscure indie bands. The first time Jeremy had seen Lauren, he had stared at her for so long that he walked directly into a senior. Later that same week, when Blake introduced them, Jeremy couldn't stop staring at her lips, imagining their glossy sheen to taste of strawberry, despite having no cause to believe her lip gloss was flavored. Okay, we're going to pause. We have some new characters. Who are some of the other characters who have entered the story? Our setting remains sort of the same in a general idea. We know them around the time of year we might be in. We know where a lot of the story takes place. And we have a hint of a problem that may be very different than one of your guesses previously. Improbably, Blake did not seem to be crushing on Lauren, despite the pair meeting up outside of school regularly to jam. Like Blake, Lauren played the guitar. Of course she did. And so, when Jeremy's mother had asked him what he'd like for his 16th birthday, a nonchalant Jeremy may have mentioned that guitars seemed kind of interesting. Blake had been excited to learn that Jeremy had been gifted a Les Paul for his birthday and had approached him shortly before the summer break. "Lauren and I are looking to start a band," said Blake. "Learn 3 chords and you can join." And Jeremy had wanted to, really, but his summer was already booked. For the first 3 games of his inaugural season, Jeremy never left the bench. His only contribution consisted of standing up every time the Terrapins made a good play. In this way, his station closely mirrored that of the other 399 spectators in the gymnasium, just with a better seat. In the 4th game, things changed. The team was down by 3 points with 5 seconds to go in the game. It was the consensus among the coaching staff that the Springfield Bears would attempt to foul the Terrapins, thereby removing any chance for Lincoln High to take the 3-pointer that might force an overtime. Coach Vinson looked at the bench. "Astor," he called. At first, Jeremy was sure he'd misheard. How could he be called into a varsity game for the first time with so much on the line? But Coach had repeated his name. "Astor, get up here and bring that magic arm of yours." And Jeremy had rushed to remove his warm-up jersey. The play was called. The buzzer sounded. Jogging onto the court felt surreal. The faces of the crowd seemed disembodied, free-floating. As if from outside himself, Jeremy obscured his body observed his body taking place on the hardwood, but he felt he had no control over it. Jeremy watched his feet run the specified route, dipping below the basket and popping out again at the wing. He watched as Terry Skoda passed him the ball from the baseline, watched as his hands caught it, watched as his elbow snapped and the ball arced over the Springfield player's outstretched arm in a perfect parabole. Swish. In overtime, the Terrapins had claimed victory, all because of Jeremy. The thrill was indescribable. Never in his life had Jeremy felt so appreciated. It was every Christmas, every birthday, every A+, all coalesced into a singular moment. But perhaps the biggest shock came the following week when he was publicly pursued by no other than Molly Mancini. Yes, That Molly Mancini, homecoming queen and head cheerleader. But Jeremy did not pine after Molly Mancini in her pink polos and Ugg boots. He pined after Lauren Sanchez in her frayed blue jeans and Led Zeppelin tees. He wondered why Blake had not pursued Lauren romantically. They'd now been friends for well over a year, but figured it was only a matter of time before they were an item. Meanwhile, a stack of fantasy novels sat untouched in Jeremy's bedroom next to a guitar that was gathering dust. The referee held up a peace sign. 2 shots, he said before bouncing the ball to Jeremy. The technical was a result of a shove from the opposing team, which was once again the Springfield Bears. Jeremy sank the first shot without thinking about it, as was his custom. The game was now tied. A trip to the state tournament was 1 point away. The crowd was so loud that the noise had become its own form of silence, solid and static. Jeremy thought back to watching his cousins and how he had wanted so badly to hear a crowd chant that way for him. But today, when the deafening thunder of alternating yells and footfalls rolled through the Terrapin bleachers, that was a tongue twister. Terrapin bleachers. It felt less like praise and more like an ocean of iron pressing down on his back. Automatic! Automatic! Jeremy couldn't help but wonder why his dream, playing out before him in real time, did not instill him more contentment. Amazingly, it was only then that he considered that maybe his dream wasn't his dream. It was a dream, cultivated as a young boy and nourished by the impressionability of youth, because how much joy, beyond those brief moments of veneration, had basketball really brought him? Jeremy swallowed with difficulty. A lump had formed in his throat, and it had nothing to do with nerves. Suddenly, and with a blinding flash of light that would have humbled Saul of Tarsus, Jeremy saw a way out. Jeremy had been confirmed in the Methodist Church at the age of 14. The boy eyed the rim with a new understanding. It was so simple. The referee held up his index finger, then bounced the ball to Jeremy. Jeremy dribbled twice, eyeing the hoop with derision. With the calm competence of a master craftsman, he cradled the ball in the pocket of his right palm, just as he had 10,000 times before. But this time, he turned his elbow an imperceptible but meaningful degree to the left. The position felt wrong. It felt off. Inwardly, Jeremy smiled. Here he was taking the biggest shot of his life, but his thoughts were not on basketball. He was picturing afternoons playing guitar with Blake and Lauren. He was picturing Saturdays spent reading fantasy novels by the creek in Marshall Park. He was picturing the carefree life of a teenager as he had never known it before. Jeremy raised the ball, hesitated, then extended his arm with the crisp fluidity of a dancer. To the gathered crowd, the movement looked no different to that which he had performed in service to the Terrapins so many times before. Only Jeremy knew the trajectory to be wrong. As the ball rose, so too rose the ocean of iron from Jeremy's weary shoulders. A new future was arcing through the sweet-scented air, and that future would begin with a tragic swish. The crowd erupted. Within seconds, Jeremy was lifted onto his teammates' shoulders. Cheerleaders hugged him, or rather hugged his legs where they dangled 4 feet above the ground. One cheerleader even kissed him on his calf. No one seemed to notice that Jeremy's face was registering not joy, but shock, confusion, and even despair. In an instant, the guitar was back in its stand. The stack of books was growing taller. Lauren's strawberry lips remained unspoiled. As he was carried around the court, faces appeared and disappeared from Jeremy's field of view. "You couldn't miss it if you tried, kid," said Assistant Coach Jenkins, shaking Jeremy's knee with enthusiasm. "Such poise," said Assistant Coach Wilkes. "There may be a starter in you yet." Soon the crowd had rushed the floor, and a swell of humanity enveloped Jeremy. He was the sun once more. Above the chaos of the celebration, the raspy voice of Coach Vincent could be heard telling the players to arrive at the gym tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. "Never too early to get better," he yelled. "We're going to state, boys." From his lofty perch, Jeremy noticed Blake and Lauren leaving the gymnasium. The sight drained the color from Jeremy's face. Locking eyes, Lauren gave a friendly wave, and Blake shot Jeremy a double thumbs up. Jeremy wanted to wave back, but his arms remained buttressed against the shoulders of his teammates. To wave would be to fall. And that is the end of the story. So if we think back to our five-finger retelling, we have characters. We have our main character, Jeremy, and then we have some of his friends. I want you to think of those friends' names, look them up if you need to. They're important to the story as well. We have the setting. The whole story takes place in one spot, and Jeremy is there the whole time, but he's thinking back to other times. The problem, is this what Jeremy wants? The events, what happens, and then what is the solution at the end?